Hello again. It's been a while since I've done this, but I'm here to do another reflection and go question by question. So this is for 764A, and the first question is, what are my organization's areas of greatest need, and what evidence do I use to determine this need? So greatest need is kind of difficult. How big do we want to go, and how small do we want to go? How focused and how broad? So if I were to just kind of take a shot in terms of what's most important, at least in terms of what's most salient in my mind, um, our organizations have a lot of needs that are generally taken care of that in a structural sense that I think are weaknesses in many other organizations, right? So I'm very lucky to be part of an organization that doesn't have as many of those innate structural needs. It doesn't mean that we are perfect. We still have a lot of room to grow. As an educational institution, one glaring need is the lack of collaboration between teachers and between departments. As a smaller institution, Kirby's faculty, we're not necessarily working in silos, but there's not a whole lot of facilitated space for collaboration with regard to instruction, assessment, or curriculum. There is plenty of evidence in plain sight to suggest um, that they're not collaborating, right? So what kind of evidence am I talking about? Our current schedule leaves perhaps maybe like 3 or 4 after-school meetings to facilitate a surface level, just a surface level of interdisciplinary work, and our department meetings primarily focus on decision making or recommendation making, for larger school initiatives. Our staff has vocalized to me enough times in the past year that they would like to be able to have the time to learn from each other and to make things consistent. This is even more so with our middle school teachers. Our sixth grade in particular needs the most sense of stability due to the developmental stage of those students. So our sixth graders, I would hate to say are being marginalized, but we are definitely not giving them the attention that I think that is important. So our sixth graders go from class to class, and it's often noted that consistency across their classes would result in a more cohesive cohort, which not only impacts the classroom management for the classes that they go into, but rather our overall school culture. One other major piece of evidence comes from a Google Form survey that was given to our staff at the end of the previous year. It asked questions about how effective they thought our structures were for improving student-teacher relationships, grade level cohesiveness, staff collaboration, etc., etc. Many said that our structures were just satisfactory, but there were too many replies that suggested that there wasn't enough time and space given for these kinds of things, right? So even though we got a lot of good ratings, there were just a few, but it was enough to say that we weren't giving enough space. My experience at other schools and other institutions probably has tainted my way of looking at things compared to some other schools. I recognize that we are not dedicating enough space for this, as much as we can. So I guess moving on to the next question then, which is what steps have I taken or will begin to take to address those needs or that need? So here in the past academic year, a scheduling so the 2018-2019 school year, a scheduling committee was formed with the task of looking into structures that may address these issues. And that was even prior to administering that survey. So the scheduling committee looked into various structures such as houses or advisories to see whether we would want to adopt one of those or not in more regular meeting times for our. So we just looked into more regular times for us to meet as a staff, right? Because one of the things that our staff wanted to do was collaborative work, and so we need to provide more time for that. The scheduling committee came to a stop last April, as it seemed that could not or would not, at the time, come to any consensus one way or the other. The debate seemed endless. It kind of went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So in response, our ALG, which is our academic leadership group, which I now chair, has taken on the responsibility of making the decisions that were left when the scheduling committee had stopped. Once our group can make some headway, I think, into making decisions that will need to impact our structure, we can then give the parameters that will hopefully unclog or unstump the scheduling committee. They were stumped over figuring out what the parameters were, whether too broad, too narrow, and that's where a lot of the debate was going. So our goal is through the ALG, the Academic Leadership Group, will come up with the parameters and then send those recommendations on to a scheduling committee, a reformed one. Hopefully that group that can then carve out the necessary time and space to accomplish those things. Another major step that is being taken is the reintroduction. It didn't exist in the 18 and 19 school year, but it existed prior to that, something called DARTs, which are basically just research teams here at school. And all they're doing is really, they're not looking at their own practices. They're not there yet, but they are looking into a wide range of topics, and they're engaging in book study and that sort of thing. And they're looking into topics that our staff has indicated as important for the school as a whole. So some of these topics include differentiation. I'm a big proponent of that being a priority, an academic priority for our school. There's another group called the Modern Day Parent for our, we're trying to push towards partnerships with our families, with our students' families, and there's a group that's in charge of that or looking into that. Cultural responsiveness is one, movement-based education, neurodiversity, and psychological safety, and more along in terms of our organizational structure rather than psychological safety for our students. So each group has assigned reading and a presentation, and they're going to have to make recommendations at a future all-staff meeting. So they have some work to do. They just actually had a meeting already. So moving on to the next questions, who might be affected by addressing this need right now, and how will they be affected? And what steps will I take to mitigate any negative or unintentional consequences of my actions? I think those two will kind of come together. I'll probably address both questions at the same time. Clearly, all of our students will be impacted on a tertiary level by the changes to our structures, right? Our students will be I don't want to say the word trickle down. They're going to feel the impact of any changes to our structures. The hope is that the changes that we do make will have a positive influence, a positive impact on our students, right? That's the whole goal. That's why we're trying to make structural changes. We hope that those efforts will result in a more positive, safe environment for all, including for our racial minorities and for our political minorities and for our students with learning differences. We hope that parents will feel a more intimate connection with our school, right? Though we tend to do a pretty good job of that already, just through staff's personalized efforts at building relationships. The overall impact on our parents is up in the air. We don't really know what's going to happen after they read the book, go through the book study. But we may have to cut from other areas that are of high priority to some of our parents. So, right, in order to build house structures and advisory structures, we may need to think about cutting away some of the academics, which I'm not sure if all of our parents will be on board with, right? Do they want us to cut instructional time? Why is that, right? It'll be a tough sell. So we'll have to carefully consider our messaging when it comes to unveiling those kinds of plans. Which makes me wonder then, what can we do to involve parents in those decisions in the first place? And maybe they'll have more buy-in and they'll understand the reasoning for why we're doing what we're doing. Right now, we're not there yet, but hopefully it just makes me think, what can we do, right? And actually, there's a danger to that, right? If we involve parents immediately, will that derail our efforts? Maybe parents will come in with preconceived notions and go, no, we don't want to cut any time from instructional time, and we don't want houses and advisories and that kind of stuff without having really gone through any process. And if we get enough of a wave early on, then we're just dead in the water. So maybe that's something that we need to consider as well. What I think would be better then would be to have all of our staff on board, enough staff to be on board with these initiatives. That way, when parents come, that we can stand firm as an organization and say, this is why we're doing it. We're all on board. We won't have the dissenting opinions that parents will. I'm not saying that we distrust our parents, but sometimes we do have community members who are afraid of changes and may glom on to maybe a dissenting viewpoint from one of our staff members. Right, I've seen that happen enough in organizations, and so our goal is to maybe try to get everyone on our staff on board in the first place. Our staff is actually another subgroup that will be directly impacted by the sudden surge of initiatives. Right, a schedule shift is going to impact the planned curriculum. It's going to especially for those teachers who like to plan things out way in advance, right? Those are the most likely to feel the pain of that kind of shift. Our hope is that by their direct involvement in making these recommendations, we can limit and control the amount of pushback we might get in the future. And of course, our administrators, people like me, being so directly involved in carrying out these plans, are going to be impacted as well. It means a whole lot of explaining and messaging and keeping our eyes on all the constituencies and being responsive pretty much all the time, right? But hey, that's what we signed up for, right? Um, that's pretty much it. And those are yeah. Uh, I'm not even sure what else I can discuss right now, but those are my reflections based upon the efforts that we're taking, a lot of scheduling and structuring. Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Take care. Bye bye.